Imagine, for a second, trying to parallel park an 800-ton solid block of limestone.
Right, which is just...
I mean, it's a nightmare even to visualize. And you aren't doing this on a flat, paved surface with, heavy, modern machinery. You're doing this 8 meters in the air, trying to perfectly align it with another massive block.
Yeah, without chipping the edges.
Exactly. Now, if you consult standard historical models, you are told that human laborers achieved this using wooden tools, ropes, and just sheer manpower. But, if you're listening to this with any kind of background in engineering or physics, you are probably already doing the math in your head.
Oh, absolutely. The numbers just don't add up.
They really don't. You know the structural limits of timber, you know the coefficient of friction, and you know that from a purely mathematical standpoint, the standard historical explanation falls completely apart. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are analyzing this profoundly fascinating intersection between unresolved archaeological anomalies and a really rigorous 2024 academic paper by Lomas, Case, and Masters. We're looking at the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis and what modern unidentified submersible objects, or USOs, might imply about the hidden history of our planet.
And it is a subject that demands, strict scientific scrutiny. We are not dealing in folklore or vague speculation today.
Right.
We're looking at this through the lens of material science, fluid dynamics, and peer-reviewed archaeological reports. The Lomas paper essentially asks us to reconsider the timeline of intelligence on Earth, mostly because the physical evidence left behind in antiquity simply does not map onto the technological capabilities of the human cultures we believe lived there.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I like to think of the history of human civilization as a massive jigsaw puzzle where scientists are highly confident they have all the border pieces figured out.
Sure, the basic timeline.
Exactly. But then you have a few bizarre, highly engineered pieces from the dead center of the puzzle that simply do not fit the picture on the box. And I want to start exactly there, with the physical hard evidence.
Yeah, that's the best place to start.
Because before we can even entertain theories about advanced hidden civilizations or, non-human intelligence, we have to look at the stone itself. If we're claiming that ancient tools couldn't have done this work, we need to prove why.
And we can prove that by looking at the machining tolerances, specifically at a site like Puma Punku down in the Bolivian Andes.
Oh man, Puma Punku is wild.
It really is. The structures there are made of andesite. Now, on the Mohs hardness scale, andesite is extremely high. It is literally harder than a steel file.
Wait, really? Harder than steel?
Yes. Yet, when we subject these ancient blocks to modern 3D scanning, we find internal grooves with a uniform depth accurate to within 0.1 millimeters.
Which is an engineering tolerance we associate with, modern CNC machining, not bronze chisels and stone hammers.
What's fascinating here is that it's not just the depth. The scans reveal internal right-angle returns at 90 degrees, plus or minus 0.1 degrees.
Wow.
Furthermore, the cut surfaces feature these continuous parallel striations measured in microns. In material science, continuous parallel striations at that microscopic scale are the definitive signature of mechanical cutting.
Because a hand tool would just bounce around.
Exactly. A hand tool bounces and chips. It does not leave a continuous, uniform microscopic groove. That implies a tool applying massive, uninterrupted downward pressure.
Okay, let me play the skeptic for a moment, because you know what the standard academic counterargument is.
Experimental archaeology.
Right, experimental archaeology. We have mainstream archaeologists who say, look, we took ancient stone hammers, we took abrasive sand, and we recreated these cuts. Does that actually hold up to physical scrutiny?
It's a great question, and it's really where the narrative often fractures. The most famous experimental replication of Puma Punku's masonry was done by Jean-Pierre Protzen. He used attested ancient techniques, stone pounders and sand abrasion.
And did it work?
Well, he managed to roughly shape the stone and achieve joint gaps of 0.8 to 1.5 millimeters. In modern masonry, that is an acceptable gap.
But 1.5 millimeters is an order of magnitude away from the original Puma Punku joints, which stay below 100 micrometers.
Precisely. Protzen's work proved that you can roughly shape andesite with stone tools. It absolutely did not replicate the sub-millimeter microtolerances or those perfect 90-degree internal angles.
But what about the argument of infinite time? You hear this a lot, that ancient peoples didn't have diamond blades, sure, but they had thousands of workers and endless decades. Couldn't thousands of workers just grind away with abrasive sand until they hit that microscopic precision?
No, because that's a fundamental misunderstanding of how machining hard stone actually works. Time does not scale linearly into microscopic precision.
Right.
Think about the physics of the tool itself. If you use sand abrasion, the friction naturally causes a rounding effect, what engineers call a tool radius.
Right. Saying infinite time solves the precision issue is like saying if you rub two sticks together long enough, you won't just get fire, you'll eventually assemble a microchip. Time doesn't automatically equal microscopic precision.
That is the perfect way to visualize it.
Because if you use coarse sandpaper for a million years, you can't carve a perfectly sharp internal 90-degree square. You'll just get a smoother, rounder curve. The physical limits of the tool don't magically change just because you've been grinding for centuries.
Exactly. And we see an even more extreme example of this physical limitation over at the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Oh, the core drills.
Yes. There is an artifact known as core drill number 7, which was famously analyzed by the pioneering Egyptologist William Flinders Petrie. It's a granite core featuring a spiral groove that descends 0.10 inches per revolution.
Okay, so the tool is biting into the stone a tenth of an inch with every single rotation. Why is that anomalous?
Because of the material matrix. Granite is composed of quartz and feldspar, and quartz is incredibly hard. To achieve that kind of helical feed rate, literally plunging a tenth of an inch per revolution into quartz, the drill has to advance hundreds of times faster than a modern diamond drill.
Wait, hundreds of times faster than a modern tool?
Yes. If you try to hand crank a copper tube with sand, you are just grinding the surface. You are not plunging into the scone.
Right, you'd just be polishing it, essentially.
Exactly. To plunge that aggressively without shattering the bit requires a high-speed rotational cutting mechanism and immense vertical pressure that simply does not exist in the archaeological record of Old Kingdom Egypt.
Okay, so we're talking about anomalous precision, but the precision is really only half of the puzzle. The logistics of moving these stones seem to break our understanding of applied physics just as thoroughly.
Oh, that's where the logistical scale entirely shatters the conventional models. Let's look at Baalbek over in Lebanon. The foundation of the temple complex there, known as the Trilithon, features 3 solid limestone blocks.
And these are the big ones.
Massive. Each block weighs an estimated 800 tons. And these are not just sitting at the bottom of a quarry. They were raised 8 meters high and placed tightly together to form a perfectly level platform.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's actually do the math on that because the numbers are just staggering.
Please do.
If you want to move an 800-ton block horizontally on wooden rollers, and we assume an incredibly optimistic coefficient of friction of 0.4, that requires over 3.1 million newtons of force.
Which is huge.
Yeah. If an average human worker exerts about 600 newtons of continuous pulling force, you need roughly 5,200 men pulling continuously, just to drag it on flat ground.
And coordinating 5,000 men on a massive array of ropes is a logistical nightmare in itself. The tension has to be distributed perfectly. But as you mentioned, dragging it is one thing. Lifting it 8 meters vertically is an entirely different equation.
Right, because standard Roman wooden cranes, the polyspastos, maxed out at a lifting capacity of about 3 to 5 tons.
Yes. So to lift an 800-ton block, you would theoretically need over 100 of these wooden capstans, physically distributed around the masses sewn, working in perfect synchronization.
Which is mathematically absurd. I mean, you were talking about trying to perfectly balance an 800-ton block in the air using wooden timber cranes. Moving one 800-ton block with ropes is hard enough, but lifting it 8 meters to fit perfectly alongside another is like trying to parallel park an aircraft carrier using only rowboats.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Because it really is that impossible.
Because if just one crew of 10 men pulls a fraction of a second too fast or too late, the torque shifts, the timber shatters, the ropes snap, and the stone crushes everyone below it.
Yeah, it would be a bloodbath.
The synchronization required doesn't just push the limits of human labor, it breaks them.
And we see similarly impossible constraints with the mass excavation of the Kailasa Temple in India. This is an entire, highly intricate temple complex carved top-down out of a solid basalt mountain.
Unbelievable sight.
Right. Roughly 400,000 tons of basalt were removed. The traditional historical attribution states it was built during an 18-year construction window under King Krishna theirs.
Okay, but if you run the arithmetic on an 18-year timeline, workers would have had to remove 5 tons of solid rock per hour, continuously, nonstop, 24 hours a day for 18 years straight.
Exactly.
And because they carved it top down, There is zero room for error. If someone swings a chisel too hard and ruins the bilateral symmetry of a pillar, you can't just build a scaffold and patch it. The rock is gone.
So we arrive at this undeniable engineering paradox.
Yeah.
The physical stone, whether it's the micron-level precision of Puma Punku or the 800-ton vertical lifts of Baalbek, just does not align with the capabilities of bronze, copper, or rudimentary wooden pulleys.
Right.
And this is the exact empirical gap that the 2024 academic paper by Lomas, Case and Masters attempts to address. Instead of assuming extraterrestrials flew across the galaxy to cut stone, their paper proposes the Cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, or CTH.
And this paper isn't fringe speculation. It was published in a serious academic context, arguing that the scientific community needs to remain open to the idea that a highly advanced intelligence might have evolved natively on Earth or arrived in antiquity and simply remained concealed.
That's the core premise, yeah.
The authors break this down into three specific theoretical variations. Let's walk through the mechanics of those.
Yeah, so the first two models, CTH1 and CTH2, propose that an ancient, highly advanced human civilization, or perhaps a distinct advanced hominid lineage, existed prior to recorded history. The hypothesis suggests they survived a massive global cataclysm, something like the Younger Dryas impact event, and subsequently went into hiding to preserve their society.
And then there is CTH3, which is the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
Right.
That is the proposal that we are dealing with time-traveling human lineages, utilizing advanced technology from our own future, operating locally in our present or past. I have to admit, that sounds like pure science fiction. How does an academic paper justify jumping to time travel?
This raises an important question, right? It sounds like science fiction until you view it strictly through the lens of theoretical physics and logistical energy constraints. The primary advantage of the CTH3 model is that it entirely bypasses the impossible physics of interstellar travel.
Because flying across the galaxy takes way too much energy.
Exactly. The energy required to accelerate a massive object to a fraction of the speed of light, and the biological hazards of traversing 40 light-years of deep space. They are monumental. The extraterrestrial model suggests that localized temporal displacement, bending space-time locally via closed time-like curves, as permitted in certain interpretations of general relativity, might actually require less energy and fewer logistical miracles than interstellar transit.
Okay, so if the intelligence behind modern unidentified anomalous phenomena is native to Earth, they don't have to cross the cosmic void. They are already sharing our local environment.
Right.
But I have to bring up the most glaring hole in this entire theory. The basic rule of archaeology is that industrial civilizations leave refuse.
Oh, absolutely. The trash problem.
Right. If they are from Earth, where is their trash? Where are their plastic bottles and discarded tools? We dig up Roman glass, we find ancient bakeries and animal bones near the pyramids. But if there was a highly advanced cryptoterrestrial civilization utilizing ultrasonic drills and high-speed machining, we find no synthetic polymers, no laser cutters, no discarded machinery.
That is the most rigorous and common critique of the hypothesis, without a doubt. The domestic archaeological record of their advanced technology is missing from the primary stratigraphy we study. But the Lomas paper argues that we are simply looking in the wrong places.
How so?
We look exclusively on land and in regions where modern humans thrive. The cryptoterrestrial hypothesis leans heavily into the sheer scale of the unmapped portions of our planet.
Because if an advanced civilization shares this planet and actively wants to remain hidden from 8 billion modern humans, they go where we fundamentally cannot survive.
Exactly. Which brings us to the connection between these ancient mysteries and modern UAP behavior.
Sure.
Specifically, the military sensor data regarding unidentified submersible objects, or USOs.
I am so glad you brought up the USOs, because this is where the physics get incredibly weird.
Very weird.
We have highly documented multi-sensor military reports of craft demonstrating transmedium travel. They move seamlessly from the atmosphere and then plunge into the ocean at hundreds of knots without decelerating.
And we really have to explain why that is so anomalous from a fluid dynamics perspective.
Yeah.
Water is approximately 800 times denser than air.
Right.
When an object traveling at Mach speeds hits the surface of the ocean, the water cannot displace fast enough. It essentially acts like solid concrete. Standard aerospace vehicles suffer catastrophic hydrodynamic destruction upon impact.
They just get crushed. But not only do these USOs survive the impact, they do it without splashing.
That is the key detail, no splash.
Yeah.
To enter the water at those velocities without a massive kinetic splash, the craft must be manipulating the fluid dynamics around it. Physicists speculate they might be generating a localized vacuum or a gravitational envelope that parts the water ahead of the craft. And once underwater, military sonar tracks these objects moving at hundreds of knots. Now, under normal physics, an object moving that fast underwater creates cavitation.
Right, the bubbles.
Exactly. The extreme pressure drop behind the craft causes the water to boil, creating a massive, deafening acoustic wake.
Yeah.
These USOs do not generate a cavitation wake.
So the U.S. military is tracking craft that completely defy hydrodynamics operating deep in the oceans.
Yes. And you have to remember, the oceans cover 70% of the planet.
Right.
The deep ocean trenches are largely unmapped to any high resolution. What stands out to you when considering this? The Lomas paper points out the undeniable strategic logic of underwater habitats. If you are a remnant civilization seeking absolute isolation, the abyssal plains are the perfect sanctuary.
It makes total sense.
We also see anomalous UAP clustered around remote hostile environments like deep volcanic systems. The Popocatépetl volcano in Mexico is a highly documented hotspot, with objects frequently observed on thermal cameras entering and exiting the active caldera.
So what does this all mean? It makes you realize how blind we actually are. We like to think we have conquered the entire globe, but really humanity just occupies the dry surface. We think we own the whole house, but realistically we only live in the living room.
I like that.
The deep oceans and the deep subterranean crust are like a massive pitch-black basement that we have barely even shined a flashlight into. But what would force a civilization into the oceans or underground in the first place?
If we look geologically, there was a violent catalyst. Around 10,900 BCE, during the Younger Dryas period, ice core data and sediment layers show that global sea levels rose dramatically, likely following a comet impact or massive glacial melting.
Okay.
What is fascinating is that this geological reality aligns perfectly with human mythology. We have over 200 distinct cultures globally, from the Sumerian Atrahasis to the Hopi, the Maya, and the Aboriginal Australians, that share a nearly identical myth of a sudden, catastrophic global flood.
So the flood myths might actually be a surviving collective memory of the Younger Dryas cataclysm. And if a technologically sophisticated prehistoric civilization existed back then, that sea level rise might have been the exact trigger that drove the survivors underground or forced them to adapt to deep marine environments.
Which initiates the cryptoterrestrial timeline. To seriously investigate this, to accept that our timeline might be missing a massive chapter of advanced ancient technology, the scientific community must practice what the Lomas paper calls epistemic humility.
Epistemic humility, acknowledging that what we know is vastly outweighed by what we don't.
Exactly.
But I'll be honest, that is an incredibly hard pill for modern society to swallow. With all our satellites, our quantum computing, our AI, it hurts the human ego to admit we might have historical amnesia.
It does.
We want to believe we are the absolute apex intelligence to ever walk this earth. It's hard for modern humans to admit someone else might have been here first.
It certainly challenges human exceptionalism. But science has formal frameworks for this exact kind of doubt. Consider the Silurian hypothesis, which is a thought experiment proposed by climatologists and astrophysicists.
Okay, what's that?
It asks, if a prior industrial civilization existed on Earth 50 million years ago, would any trace of them survive the planet's tectonic recycling and geological weathering?
Oh, wow. And the physical answer to that is no, right? Because over tens of millions of years, steel rusts away to nothing. Synthetic plastics eventually degrade.
Yes.
And more importantly, the Earth's tectonic plates subduct the crust deep into the mantle. The very cities they built would be literally melted down and recycled by the planet itself.
Precisely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we don't even have to go back millions of years to see our academic timeline shatter. We just have to look at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey.
Oh, that site changed everything.
It really did. Discovered in 1994, this site definitively proved that supposed nomadic hunter-gatherers were organizing, cutting, and aligning massive 20-ton, geometrically perfect megaliths around 9600 BCE.
Which is millennia before the academic consensus previously claimed the invention of agriculture or the wheel even existed.
Exactly. Anomalous data is exactly what triggers paradigm shifts.
Right. So when Petrie measures that 0.10-inch feed rate in a granite core, or when a military sensor tracks a USO traveling at 300 knots underwater without a cavitation wake, we're observing physical data points that our current paradigm simply cannot digest.
And the Lomas paper explicitly acknowledges that while the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis might be statistically unlikely, it is intellectually dangerous to dismiss physical anomalies just because they violate our preferred narrative of human history.
Absolutely. So just to recap the journey we've been on today, We have traveled from the unreplicated sub-millimeter machining tolerances of the andesite blocks at Puma Punku to the 800-ton logistical nightmares of lifting the Baalbek trilithon.
We really covered a lot of ground.
We did. We've seen how ancient mass and precision defy our models of Bronze Age human labor. And we've explored the 2024 academic framework of the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, mapping the mystery of missing ancient technology directly onto the modern reality of transmedium USOs hiding in the deepest oceans.
It really forces a profound shift in perspective. But, there is one final piece of modern data we haven't touched on yet, and it brings this entire ancient mystery right into our lab today.
Let's hear it. If the deep underground is the hiding place, are we finally looking down there?
We are. In 2025, Advanced Ground Penetrating Radar, or GPR, was deployed beneath the massive polygonal stone walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru.
Okay.
The scans detected massive subsurface anomalies, deep chambers, and structures that currently lack any clean official explanation. But the data from Göbekli Tepe is even more staggering.
Right, because archaeologists have only uncovered, what, a tiny fraction of that site?
Over 90% of Göbekli Tepe remains completely unexcavated. But recent 2025 GPR surveys mapped out the bedrock beneath the complex. They have confirmed the existence of engineered, hidden underground voids.
Wait, really? Voids under the bedrock?
Yes, and the radar data is unambiguous. The walls of these subterranean spaces are, quoting the surveyors here, too straight to be natural. They are artificial chambers, and they have been sealed in absolute darkness for 12,000 years.
Yeah, which leaves you with a deeply provocative thought to chew on. You are looking at the puzzle of human history. You see the anomalous pieces in the center that refuse to fit. You see the mathematical impossibilities of Baalbek and the mechanical precision of Puma Punku. So I leave you with this final challenge. What happens to our fragile academic consensus the day those subterranean chambers at Göbekli Tepe are finally opened? And we find out exactly what, or who, has been waiting in the dark.
It is a mystery that requires us to keep our science entirely open to the impossible.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. Keep questioning the puzzle.